Hey everybody, this is Josh from Josh and the Who here on ESPN Houston. I'm here with Andrew Carlson, who produces the show with me. We're here to talk Texans, and look, Texans lost week 2 against the Colts. It wasn't pretty sometimes. The defense looked awful. There were bright spots that we both liked that we saw from the game. And there's this conversation going around through the fan base, through the media, that the Texans are in win-now mode. I hear multiple people say the Texans are in win-now mode. They're in win-now mode because they traded an extra first away. They traded a second away. They're in win-now mode, and I just don't see it like that. Maybe it's bad asset management. Maybe the trade to move up for Will Anderson at number 3 in this last draft, maybe one day it ends up being a bad move. But it doesn't put the Texans in win-now modes. They are very clearly in a rebuild in my mind.
Well, I feel like part of the fan base, and I'm guilty of it as well, gets swept up in the hype and everything that came with the offseason, right? The hiring of D'Amico Ryans and all the positive vibes that created around the team and the franchise, and then everything that came with drafting C.J. Stroud, your quarterback of the future, number 2 overall, trading up to go get Will Anderson. There was this feeling, I think, with all the positive change that had happened with this franchise, which is the most positive change we've seen around Kirby for, 3-4 years now, at least. All of a sudden, you've got this like crest of momentum where you're thinking, okay, things are going to get better right away. And very obviously, I think now people are starting to realize that's not going to be the case. And that doesn't mean that the rebuild's not on schedule. Right. It just means that perhaps expectations were blown a little bit out of proportion.
Look, it has looked awful for years. It's looked almost as bad as my pasty white knees that if I'm guessing, as we're recording after the fact, I'm guessing Brandon has probably covered them up with some kind of graphic or logo or something like that. Thank you, Brandon, for that, because I wore shorts because I'm stupid. But it hasn't looked great. And the problem is people just think the last 4 years that when it hasn't looked great, that, that's the start of the rebuild. No, guys, that was the beginning of the suck. There was no rebuilding during that time. They had to get through the Deshaun Watson stuff. They had to get through the Brian Gain era. They had to get through the Jack Easterby stuff. They had to get rid of Bill O'Brien. They had to go through David Culley. They had to go. There's so many different scenarios that they had to run through that were never the rebuild. It was never the next moment. You don't really officially start your rebuild until you bring in a franchise quarterback.
Exactly.
That's as soon as you bring in the franchise quarterback, you get the coach that you really want, not a couple of placeholders in David Culley and Lovie Smith. You have that now, and you just got that. The rebuild just started 7 or 8 months ago whenever you hired D'Amico Ryans, whenever you drafted C.J. Stroud. That's when the rebuild started. We're 2 weeks into a rebuild, everybody. So, look, there are things that are going to be wrong with this team. This talent, the talent on this roster isn't great all across the board. They've got 2 more drafts with all sorts of draft capital to continue to fill those holes. The Texans are going to be fine. And this rebuild, we'll talk about it a little bit on the show, but this rebuild is right on schedule, and we're going to talk about what that schedule looks like for the Texans.
Right, and you're 100% correct there. The timer started this offseason. I know people don't want to view it that way because of how bad the suck was for this team over the past 2 seasons plus. People don't want to view it as basically we were bad for 2 seasons straight, worse than the NFL and you're bad, and that it was almost all for naught. Well, it wasn't all for naught, but essentially the reality was you were in such a poor position as a franchise because of the decisions that were made by Bill O'Brien, Jackie Easterby, and others in that front office and decision-making group, that's just where the franchise was set up, that you had to go through that awful, awful period where you were just in the mud with no way to get out for 2 years. Now the clock has finally started, and you're going to continue to see positive signs, but part of a rebuild is the development of the team is not just going to be completely linear, right? It's not just going to be positive step after positive step after positive step. It's going to take some time for everything to gel, to come together, and to develop. And maybe you have a step back after a couple of positive steps forward. That's what we saw in the defense in week 2, right? Everyone was blown away by what the defense was able to do against the Ravens, and they took a step back against the Colts. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they take another step forward against the Jags in week 3. It's just a matter of overall, as the season progresses, can you see that positive development on both sides of the ball? And look, it's going to translate into a few wins once both sides, the offense and the defense, are able to take positive steps in the right direction in the same weeks. We just haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it's almost like the fan base is looking at a couple of different teams. You brought up the Jags. The Jags are a team who they just went through the mud, and it looks like they're finally starting to, well, they didn't look great against the Chiefs, but they're finally starting to become a team that's coming out of their rebuild. The Lions are another team that you look at. They've just added talent after talent after talent. They traded Matt Stafford away, got a bunch of picks, and Jared Goff that they thought was just going to be a placeholder, but he's looked good for them. And so they're now at the point to where they're being talked about as a dark horse in the NFC. And I think a lot of the fan base here is just like, hey, look, it took them 4 or 5 years. It's been 4 years for the Texans. Why are we not there yet? It's because we never really truly started. Like, we never, as a fan base, as media, we never started that. The Texans didn't start that. So it's just going to take time, like you said. They have to go through the crap. We all have to crawl around in the crap with the Houston Texans. And I get it. I understand people are mad. I understand you go through a year. I mean, it's 20 years of above average play to mediocrity to horrible football that you've watched.
Never made a conference championship.
Exactly, yeah. And the one time you thought you were going to make a conference championship, it gets blown to hell because of the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. They walked into that buzzsaw. But there's hope. And I think truly for the first time, I've been watching the Texans for 17 years. I think truly for the first time, there is more hope at the worst that they have been than we've seen at any time. We're not watching Davis Mills play quarterback. We're not watching Ryan Mallett. We're not watching Brian Hoyer. CJ Stroud looks legitimate, and everybody just needs to calm down. We all need to breathe together. And we'll figure it out. But look for the bright spots. Don't look at the hole. It's going to be crap for at least another season. At least, maybe 2 more. But look at the positives that are going to come out of it. Does CJ keep growing? Does D'Amico keep growing? Does Bobby Slowick keep growing as a play caller? That's what I'm looking for. And we've seen progress in the first 2 weeks in some areas. We've seen drop-offs in some areas. We've seen injuries all over the place. But you have to give it 17 games. You can't just sit here and freak out after 2 games. It's okay. I'm here. We're here to help you guys out. So just calm down. We'll all breathe, and we're all going to relax going into week 3. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about the week 3 matchup.
They're going to bounce back, and I don't really have any expectation to think otherwise. D'Amico has talked a bunch already in the couple of days after that loss to the Colts, where he has mentioned the most important thing is how you bounce back. And I have full belief that he's going to lead that team and get that defense right after what we saw against the Colts in week 2. But look, like you mentioned, the progress isn't just going to come from CJ Stroud. It's going to have to come from everybody in that team, because you've got a rookie head coach, you've got a rookie quarterback, and an offensive coordinator who has never called plays before at the NFL level. So all of a sudden, you're in this situation where, like, every single week is going to be a learning experience for the most important guys at every single level of the team. So to expect like excellence straight out of the gate, I just think it's a little much, and you have to be willing to understand it's a process and progress will come, but it's going to be step by step. It is at no point going to be just every step is a forward move. That's just not how it's going to work. That's not reality.
I want to go to other people that are the angriest at D'Amico Ryans, at CJ Stroud, at Bobby Slowick. And I want to go to them like their first week or two at a new job and just judge everything that they do. It's like, didn't really love how you did that. Doesn't seem like that's the right process. Well, that was pretty good. You got better there, but you dropped off in this area. Like, come on, it's been 2 weeks. The team needs time. The coaches need time. These players need time. But there's young talent. There's a lot of hope, and there's a lot of positivity moving forward in this. Hey, listen to us, Josh and the Who, 12 to 3, Monday through Friday. Me and Andrew are on there. We got a bunch of different co-hosts and guests that come on with us. We've been having a lot of fun lately, and I think we might be the only people who might bring some Texans positivity during a rebuild season and during a rebuild. But check you guys later. Thank you so much for watching, and listen to ESPN Houston 97.5 and 92.5.